Gnome blessings, my fellow Gnomians. Today we turn to a presence that walks with humanity in every age, every language, every place we've ever called home. Ghosts. You can find them on clay tablets and cathedral walls, in folk tales by the fire, and late night texts from a friend who swears they just smelled their grandmother's perfume in an empty room. Soldiers report them on battlefields, nurses speak of them at end of life bedsides, families tell stories that start with, I know this sounds, but, and then describe something that could either be gentle, terrifying, both. Poll after poll suggests that a remarkable portion of people, millions upon millions, if not billions, have either seen a ghost, felt a presence, or experienced a moment that they cannot fit inside of ordinary explanations. Whatever else we argue about, ghosts are one of humanity's oldest and widest conversations. This episode isn't a courtroom. We're not here to score points for belief or skepticism. We're here to look carefully and kindly at the full picture. The experiences people insist are real, the science that explains away some of them, or maybe helps convince you that it's real, the puzzles that remain, the comfort ghosts bring, the fear that they carry at sometimes, and the way this phenomenon keeps tugging at the biggest question of all: what happens after we die? Here's the path we're going to take. First, we'll acknowledge the universality of ghost belief, how every culture has its language for the lingering dead, from ancestral visitations to hungry spirits to the shades that simply refuse to leave the place that made them. Then we'll sit with some evidence and testimony, the patterns and eyewitness accounts, the photographs and recordings, the physical oddities in rooms that shouldn't be cold. We'll honor the stubborn consistency of those reports across time and place without pretending that consistency is the same as proof. And after that, we're going to dive into the science. Some hauntings have excellent natural explanations: the mind under stress, the brain's tendency to see faces and shadows, the way low frequency sound can produce dread, or how certain environmental conditions can make a room feel occupied. We will let those explanations do their good work, because demystifying a drafty hallway doesn't diminish mystery, it clears space for what truly asks to be wondered at. Then we'll open the door to why. The beliefs and theories behind ghosts are some spirits earthbound, pulled by trauma or unfinished business? Are some hauntings residual, like a recording that plays at the right conditions? Do loved ones visit to comfort the living? How do ancestor traditions and religious teachings, from prayers for the dead to festivals of remembrance, shape what people experience? Let those frameworks speak in their own voices and ask what each of them protects. We'll also be honest about the two faces. I'm sure there's more, but we're going to cover two faces of ghosts. Many encounters are tender: a presence at the foot of a bed, a goodbye that never had time to happen, a dream so vivid you wake up and feel at peace. Others are very unsettling: knocking walls, objects flung, shadowed figures in doorways, rooms that just never get warm. We'll talk about both, because the phenomenon refuses to only be a lullaby or a threat. From there, going to visit some haunted places, why certain houses, roads, prisons, hospitals, inns, and fields feel like they remember. Whether you think place memory is energy, story, geology, or all of the above, there's something uncanny about rooms that hold a mood like a stain. We'll ask what those places are teaching about history, reverence, and the costs human lives have paid on the ground. And finally, we'll ask the question beneath all the questions: what do ghosts say about life after death? If even a fraction of these stories are exactly what they seem, then consciousness may not end when breath does. If they are something else, residual time, a trick of perception, the brain's grief translating into mercy, then ghosts still reveal a human truth. We are built to remain connected. We ache to keep loving past the moment when bodies fail. We search, and sometimes the world seems to answer back. Throughout, as always, we'll keep the Church of Gnome's posture of reverence without credulity, curiosity without contempt. We don't have to agree on what a ghost is to treat the people who've met one with kindness. We can let science trim superstition and still leave room for the stubborn remainder, the part that stands in a quiet hallway and says, "Someone is here." And then, before we dive into all that, one announcement. Okay? Oh, the Gnomian Book of Proverbs, Teachings and Reflections of the Church of Gnome. The full book, it is complete, and it is available for pre-order at churchofgnome.org. And yeah, it was just a couple days ago I put up the pre-order, and just so stoked at how many of you have already pre-ordered it. Half of the supply that I initially put into production has already sold through, so I have to hurry up and get more into production because it comes out November 1st. First batch of books is getting to me. It's supposed to be between November 7th and 10th that the bulk shipment will arrive to me. And so I would expect that your book will be shipped out within a few days of me getting that. All right, there we go. The house is quiet. The floorboards will probably creak. They always do when we talk about things like this. Let's begin where humans always begin, with the fact that nearly every people in every time have said in one way or another, the dead are not only gone, they're near, and sometimes they knock. So before we argue about what a ghost is, it's worth noticing something simple and astonishing. Nearly every culture that has ever kept a fire has told stories about the dead who linger. On the oldest clay tablets of Mesopotamia, the Atemu, the shade of people, could trouble the living if burial rites were neglected. In Homer and Virgil, the Greek and Roman dead move as shades in the underworld, needing blood or breath to speak. In the Nordic north, the Draugur is not a whisper, but a weight. Corporal, restless, sometimes violent, proof that the grave can be porous. Sail east and you meet the cycle of hungry ghosts in Chinese tradition, spirits driven by craving, fed by family offerings, so desire won't consume them. Cross the ocean and you find Dia de los Muertos, where marigold roads, pan de muerto, and photos of ofrendas welcome the departed home, not as intruders, but as guests. You can add Japan's yūrei in white kimono, Celtic banshees who warn by wailing, West African and indigenous ancestor reverence where the dead are not gone so much as present differently, and the chorus becomes unmistakable. Different languages, different theologies, same human intuition. Relationship doesn't end where breath does. The forms vary, but the motifs rhyme. One of the oldest is simple proximity, the sense that someone is here. Sometimes it's visual, a figure in the doorway, a person seated on the edge of the bed. Often it's the senses telling a story together. Footsteps in an empty hall, a pressure on the stairs, a chill that moves with you. The undeniable smell of a specific perfume in a house where no one wears it. Deathbed nurses will quietly tell you about visitation dreams where people report last conversations with parents or partners who have already died, and about deathbed visions where the dying speak to someone just outside of the room that only they can see, and then soften as if a knot has been untied. We meet the same pattern in ritual. Most of the world's funeral practices, washing, clothing, singing, lighting, feeding, naming, are less about disposal than relationship management. They acknowledge that grief is both emotional and logistical. The living must carry on, the dead must be placed somewhere that honors them and doesn't unmake the living. Traditions that include prayers for the dead, ancestor altars, or set days of remembrance are public ways of doing what private rooms do all the time, staying in conversation with those that we love. There's a practical side to universality, too. Ghost stories encode moral memory and place memory. A haunted inn tells a modern traveler, things happened here, so act like a good guest. A haunted battlefield says, walk with respect. A haunted house can be community shorthand for a family wound the street has watched for years. Whether you think a place holds energy, story, geology, or all three, haunted becomes a way of pointing at a density of meaning that the day to day can't quite dissolve. It's also true that ghosts aren't only warnings, they're bridges. The gentlest encounters, especially with loved ones, are almost embarrassingly ordinary in tone. A dream so vivid you wake up with peace instead of panic. A picture frame you'd sworn you had left face down, now facing up on a day that you needed some courage. A child describing a conversation with grandpa in the garden, though that grandpa had died before they were even born. You don't have to force a doctrine onto those moments to feel what they do. They put a hand on the wire between love and absence, and they make it hum. And yet, for every candlelit vigil, there's a cold hallway. Universality includes the unsettling. Cultures everywhere keep stories of the angry dead, unjustly treated dead, or simply noisy dead. Knocks in threes, objects mislaid and returned in odd places, and upstairs that won't stay quiet. A room that is just always cold as if the house is holding its breath. Some of these can be explained by architecture, wind wiring, infrasound, the human brain under strain. Many can. The remarkable thing is that even after the drafts are sealed, the carbon monoxide detectors are installed, the stories a lot of times still persist across centuries with familiar shapes. It's tempting in a skeptical age to treat that persistence as a mass failure of perception, but another reading is available. Maybe ghosts are less about gullibility and more about continuity. Human beings are exquisitely social creatures. We are born into a web of relationships that tells us who we are, and when a strand snaps, we reach instinctively, insistently into the empty space where it lives or lived. Sometimes we reach with prayer, sometimes with science, sometimes with ritual, sometimes with a story that begins, I know how this sounds, but the reach is the point. Universality says The reach is species typical. If you're listening with a scientist's ear, universality is still a fact worth holding, a phenomenon reported across eras, geographies, and belief systems by people who, in many other respects, disagree with one another. That deserves careful attention, even if your conclusion is psychological or environmental rather than spiritual. If you're listening with a mystic's ear, universality sounds like a chorus of witnesses saying that the veil is not a wall. For us as Gnomians, the takeaway of this first step is posture. Ghosts are not a fringe curiosity we just wheel out in October, even though I'm literally wheeling out this episode in October. They live at the seam where memory, place, grief, love, and mystery meet. Their right response to that seam isn't smug certainty or panicked denial. It's the same response we bring to every threshold. Your manners, reverence without credulity, curiosity without contempt, practicality that checks for drafts and wiring, and then, if needed, leaves one candle lit because a grandmother might still visit her own kitchen after midnight. From here, we're going to now move into the testimony, the kinds of encounters people describe, what tends to cluster in haunted places, and why so many accounts feel strangely alike. Then we'll invite science to trim what it can, make room for what it can't, and help us keep our lanterns steady while we listen. The simplest answer is also the most common. A presence. Not always a figure, often a feeling that the room isn't empty. The air changes. The hairs rise, unless you're bald like me. The way a house feels different when someone you love is home, even before you hear the key in the door. Many accounts start there and then pick up details the body swears by. Footsteps in an upstairs hallway that should be still. Floorboards that depress where no weight should be. Drafts that move with you rather than around you. A smell you can name. Pipe smoke, lavender water, the exact cigar your grandfather's favorite one was, arriving in a shut room and fading like a memory closing itself. Then comes like little physics problems. Batteries dying faster than they should in one corner of a house and work fine elsewhere. Lights flicker at a precise moment every night, then don't when you bring company. Radios detune themselves. Phones record static where the rest of the room is clear. Objects shift in quiet, unsettling ways. A photograph that refuses to stay still. Keys that migrate to a windowsill your mother always used. A book on the kitchen table you're certain that you had put back on the shelf. These are small things, tiny wrong notes, but people don't forget them because their days have a rhythm and something keeps leaning on the beat. Apparitions, when they do show, aren't always the transparent Victorians of pop culture. Most people describe glimpses, a figure where a figure shouldn't be, seen out of the corner of the eye, a shadow that isn't a shadow because it moves against the light, a person in like time period clothing who appears utterly ordinary until you realizing they're standing where no, there's another object going right through them, or passing through a closed door. Full-bodied apparitions happen, and when they do, the reports are usually, he was just there, like anyone. He looked at me, and then he turned away. There are also patterns, names that get called from an empty room, often in a loved one's voice. Knocks coming in sets of 3, as if someone on the other side of the wall is messing with ya. Rooms go cold and stay cold as if a piece of winter has been left on a chair. Pets behave like sensitive instruments. A cat tracks something across the room with its head, pupils wide. A dog refuses to go up a staircase, it usually races up. And there are the multi witness moments, the visitor seen by two people at once, the footsteps heard by everyone in the living room, the door that opens while six friends stare at it and then shuts gently as if someone remembered their manners. Some testimonies fall into recognizable categories. Crisis apparitions. A person appears to a loved one at the moment of their death, across the town or across the whole world. Visitation dreams that are not like other dreams, coherent, saturated with peace, leaving the dreamer convinced that they've had a real conversation and sometimes delivering a fact that they couldn't have known otherwise. Then residual hauntings, where the same sound or scene loops like a recording. The woman crossing the landing, the boys running in the hallway, the soldier on the stairs. No interaction, just repetition, as if a house replays its heaviest moments under the right conditions. Then there's the instrumental tier, EVPs, photographs, video. With EVP investigators, sometimes ordinary families set a recorder in a room and ask simple questions. On playback, there's often nothing. Sometimes there's a murmur, the ear smoothened to a word, and occasionally there is a voice that really does seem to answer. One, two, three syllables in a register that doesn't match anyone present. If you're technically minded, you can make a list of confounds, pareidolia. That's where, humans are really great at just making patterns out of stuff. Mic artifacts, radio contamination. If you're open but careful, you notice that the most compelling EVPs tend to come in sessions that were otherwise quiet, that answer the specific question asked and then repeat at the same location over time as if the signal lives in the same spot. Photographs and video live under the same sort of caution. Dust can sometimes look like orbs. Long exposure can makes time look like a ghost. Lens flare has fooled eyes better than mine. I got glasses. And yet there are some of the stubborn files, the odd faces in a window where there was no reflection to make one, the figure on the staircase where the shutter speed was too fast for there to be a blur to blame it on, the thing that walks across a hallway while everyone in the frame keeps talking, oblivious to it. It's not necessarily proof on a lab bench, but something that won't let go of your jacket. Famous cases map these patterns onto places that many people know by name. The Borley Rectory in England. It's the most haunted house of its day. Gave the world footsteps, thrown stones, writing on walls, and a long debate about embellishment versus event. The stories still sit in the culture because something kept generating reports there for decades. And then there's Gettysburg. It has a different weight. Park rangers and tourists alike tell of muskets firing when there's no reenactment scheduled. Men in ragged blue or gray disappearing into the haze. The smell of powder rolling across a field in the dead air of August. In places built for sorrow, prisons, asylums, battlefields, the reports are so frequent it's as if the land has learned a language and it just keeps speaking it. So, what do we do with all this if we're trying to be honest? We admit first that consistency isn't always the same as proof. Drafts, wiring, infrasound, sleep deprivation, expectation, and the story hungry human brain explain more weird nights than some of us would like to admit. We also admit that consistency matters. When thousands of unrelated people in unrelated places keep describing the same handful of things, The presence, the footsteps, the voice on playback, the cold, the smell, the figure standing in the hallway. It's reasonable to say there is a pattern here that is very much worth our attention. You don't have to pick a side yet, or ever. I guess it's Church of Gnome. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Treat testimony as testimony. Humans telling you what happened to them personally. Treat the recordings as recordings. Interesting, sometimes flawed, and sometimes very unnerving. Treat the famous cases as a reminder that some rooms refuse to just become ordinary. And keep your posture, your lanterns steady. Breathe easy. Keep your curiosity awake, because next we're going to have science come in to see how much noise that we can clear out of this without losing the full signal, and whether, after we've sealed the drafts, checked the carbon monoxide detectors, is anything still knocking. So if testimony is the chorus, science is the careful ear asking, what else could make that sound? The goal is not to flatten mystery, but to clear the noise so whatever remains has room to be heard. Start with the brain. We are very predictive creatures. Your nervous system constantly guesses what should be there and backfills the rest. In low light, at the edge of sleep, under stress, that guesswork gets bold. Two familiar patterns show up again and again in haunting reports. The sensed presence. Mountaineers alone on a ridge, sailors on night watch, people sitting up with the dying. Many describe the feeling that someone else is there. Neurologically, a blend of fatigue, stress hormones, and the way the brain maps the body can produce a shadow self slightly misregistered in space. The experience is real, but the interpretation is up for grabs. Then sleep paralysis. Your body enters ramatonia, where your muscles start shutting down while your mind starts gaining more awareness. You can't move, the room feels occupied. It's like a pressure is sitting on your chest or a figure standing in the doorway. Cultures name this the night hag, the mare, an old ghost. So, physiology calls it a mistimed handoff between your sleep systems. Knowing that doesn't make the experience less terrifying sometimes, but it does hand you a way out. Ride the breath, wait a few seconds, and awareness really comes back on. We also are pattern makers. Pareidolia, like seeing faces in clouds, Jesus in the toast. It extends to footsteps in heat pipes and whispers in the air conditioner. That's not stupidity, it's survival. A brain that errs toward there's someone there has kept more of our ancestors alive than one that said, that's just probably the wind, and then all of a sudden they get attacked or eaten. The same bias that saves us can also tell us a ghost is there when we're standing in a creaky hallway at 2 a.m. Now, change rooms and environments can manufacture haunting-like effects. There's infrasound, a very low frequency sound. It can vibrate the eye and body in odd ways. In some lab cases, a standing wave around 19 hertz made people uneasy and produced fleeting gray figures at the edge of their vision. And so, you know what? Maybe what you're seeing is that you just have to fix a fan or something that was generating the tone, and maybe the apparitions will vanish. And then there's electromagnetic fields, which have been linked controversially to presence, sensations in lab setups. Whether or not the mechanism holds up, High EMF in a basement with bad wiring can make people feel odd. Prickly skin, dizziness, malaise. Ghost hunters carry EMF meters for a reason, but electricians do too. And then carbon monoxide leaks are a known villain. A century old medical case report describes a haunted family tormented by footsteps and voices. A faulty furnace was bleeding carbon monoxide into the house, starving their brains of oxygen and spiking anxiety and hallucinations. The ghosts disappear when the leak is fixed. And then mold, damp, and air pressure changes can tank mood and cognition, trigger headaches, and make rooms feel oppressive. A house with poor ventilation and a story to tell is a recipe for very weird nights. But even our gadgets have pitfalls. EVPs often capture words and random noise because the brain is exquisitely good at finding speech, especially when primed by a question. Photos collect dust or bugs as glowing orbs. Long exposure turns someone walking into a smear that looks like a spirit. Video inherits all those problems plus compression artifacts. None of this means that the best files are fake. That means you need to rule out the easy tricks before you pin a name to the hard ones. So, is that the whole story? For many cases, yes. Seal the drafts, fix the furnace, sleep more, expect less, and, your nights might get quieter. But even after you do all that, you're left with a stubborn remainder. The crisis apparitions that coincidence with or coincide with a death across town, visitation dreams that deliver accurate information, multi witness events in places with no carbon monoxide, no standing fans, no high EMF equipment, no priming. That is where the conversation gets interesting. Not because science fails, but because the frontier of science is exactly where hard to measure human experiences live. So there are a few working hypotheses people reach for. There's bereavement phenomena are more common than most realize. A significant share of the recently bereaved report sensing, seeing, hearing, or smelling the departed in ways that comfort them more than disturb them. Psychology can call these grief hallucinations. Pastoral care can call them mercy. Either way, they are normal and often healing. And residual hauntings fit a recording metaphor. Places hold patterns, especially where emotion and repetition were intense, and under certain conditions, replay them. The woman on the landing, the soldier on the stairs. Speculative ideas like the stone tape theory try to give this physics, quartz, geomagnetism, but the evidence is thin. As a descriptive category, though, residual matches what people see, loop scenes with no interaction. And survival hypothesis say some aspect of consciousness persists after death. Most lab work here is indirect. Studies of vertical perception during cardiac arrest, presentiment experiments, the long, contentious history of parapsychology meta analysis. The signal is there, is one. It's faint and easily swamped by noise. The stance is neither triumph nor dismissal. We don't necessarily know yet, so keep measuring, scientists. Come on now. And place memory doesn't require mysticism to make sense. Trauma sites are haunted because we haunt them through story, ritual, and the simple fact that 1,000 minds expecting a wait will often feel one. Social expectation is not a trivial force, it shapes perception and behavior. So, what do we do with a landscape where both explanations and enigmas live? We keep both hands open. One hand checks the carbon monoxide detector, asks a doctor about sleep, and treats the human tendency to see faces in fog as a bug and a feature. The other hand stays steady enough to say, I've done the homework, and something is still knocking. That posture doesn't weaken wonder, it protects it from being spent on leaky vents. And our next step will turn from how to why. The frameworks people use to make sense of ghosts, unfinished business, love that lingers, recordings in the walls, visits from ancestors, and what each framework asks the living, because explanations are only half the story, meaning is the other half, and ghosts, whatever they are, have always been about meaning. When people say, I saw a ghost, they're not only describing an event, they're reaching for a frame, a way to fit the experience into a world that still makes sense. Across centuries, a handful of explanations return again and again. Some speak the language of spirit, some speak the language of ritual, some speak the language of physics. All of them tell you something, not only about ghosts, but also about us. Let's start with the oldest human hunch that the dead can remain near. In spiritual terms, these are the earthbound, spirits who stick close because something in their story snagged. The snag might be unfinished business, a promise not kept, a truth not said. It might be trauma. A life ended so suddenly that the person hasn't quite realized they're dead. Or it's the most human thing of all, attachment. A love so woven into a house or a certain area that the living and the dead keep overlapping there like two songs that are sharing a chorus. In this frame, hauntings invite repair, apologies made aloud, names spoken, candles lit, wrongs righted, farewells finally said. A quieter theory steps back from intention and treats some hauntings as a recording rather than a conversation. People call these residual impressions, left in place by intense emotion and repetition, like light burned onto an old film. The woman who always crosses the landing, crosses it again. The boot steps on the stair climb at the same hour. The door that never quite latched swings as if to complete its habit. In this view, you can't help necessarily a residual haunting because there's no one there to help. You adjust your expectations, bless the room, and say, the house remembers, the way you might say that, your scar remembers. Then there are stories almost everyone recognizes, a visitation. A grandmother sits on the edge of the bed the night before her funeral and smooths your hair. A partner who loved flowers brushes your shoulder in a dream that feels like waking, and you smell the flowers in the room. Or a child tells the family that dad stopped by to say that it's okay, and using the exact same phrase or way that that deceased parent would do it. These moments are, near almost always sound like a more gentle ghost story. They don't need proof to do their job. They quiet this screaming wire between love and absence, just enough for the living to just, make it through the next hour of their grief and their healing. Religious and folk traditions layer their own meanings onto these experiences. In Catholic teaching, souls in purgatory may be aided by the prayers of the living. Some appearances are read as requests for masses, alms, reconciliation. The ritual response is simple, pray, amend, remember, because relationship extends beyond the grave. In many parts of China, families honor the departed during Qingming, a tomb sweeping day, and the Ghost Festival, tending graves, burning offerings, inviting ancestors to partake. Across West African lineages, masked gungun ceremonies embody the presence of the ancestors to bless and admonish the living. Among many indigenous nations in the Americas, the ones who came before remain kin, not metaphors, and they have their own protocols to govern how and when to speak their names, tell their stories, ask for help. In these frames, a ghost is not an intruder, it is family. And family is an obligation of care in both directions. Buddhist cosmologies name a different facet, the hungry ghost. Beings driven by cravings, depicted with swollen bellies and narrow throats that can't be satisfied. Whether you read this literally or as a psychological map, it's a striking way to hold hauntings that feel like compulsion. Rooms that tug and drain, habits that cling to households, patterns that live on after people die. The ritual answer is to feed wisely, offerings for the restless and practices that cool cravings within ourselves. And modern metaphysical proposals try to give this strange a scaffolding. One is the energy idea that consciousness is not a byproduct of brain matter, but a field. And like other fields, it doesn't simply evaporate, it dissipates. Most nights, that dissipation is immediate and peaceful. Some nights, maybe under the right conditions, geology, humidity, magnetism, emotion, the field persists a while, like heat held in a stone after sunset. Another proposal is more sci fi esque. It's many worlds, parallel realities, time layered rather than linear. In that frame, the soldier on the stair is neither a dead man or a recording necessarily. He is a person in another slice of the same house, intersecting for a blink with yours. No consensus here, just metaphors that are trying to keep up with reports. Um, so that's almost like some of the gnome theories that they are beings layered onto our dimension that phase through sometimes. Whoa. So you'll notice what each theory protects. The earthbound story protects moral repair. It says the living have work to do with the dead, and vice versa. Residual theory protects place. It says homes and roads and fields hold the groove of all of our feet. Visitation protects love. It says relationship is stronger than biology. Purgatory protects prayer. Ancestor veneration protects kinship and continuity. Hungry ghosts protect the warning that craving consumes. Energy and multiverse ideas protect mystery, the sense that we live in a world wider than our day planners allow. And then there is the very Gnomian observation that maybe ghosts are less about them than about us. Encounters arrive precisely where existential questions pinch, at bedsides, in empty kitchens, in houses that should have one more laugh in them and don't anymore. A ghost, literal or not, is a way of saying this mattered. A person mattered. A promise mattered. A trauma mattered. A love still does. Even when a haunting yields to natural causes, whether that be sleep paralysis, infrasound, the furnace leaking, the reason we told a spirit story first is it's meaningful. Humans reach for continuity. We insist the fabric doesn't tear so easily. Sometimes the world seems to answer back. Sometimes the answer is our own deep need speaking in a voice we can hear. Either way, the lesson is tenderness. Treat grief like weather, not like personal failure. And where does that leave us as we walk through October nights with open minds and steady hearts? With manners again, people. If you think you're in the presence of the earthbound, act as if repair is possible. Speak gently, name the wrong, offer blessing, and close the evening with peace. If it feels residual, acknowledge the memory and live well while in that room. If it feels like a visitation, say thank you and let the gift be a gift. If your tradition calls for prayer, pray. If your lineage calls for offerings, prepare the table. If your body says this is fear wearing a mask, then, go check your vents, eat dinner, ask a friend to stay over. All of those are faithful responses. So next we're going to turn toward the two faces of ghosts. And I think, like I mentioned, I'm sure there's more faces we could throw in there, but I'm going with two. The tenderness and the terror, and why both belong in the archive. For now, hold this. Whatever ghosts are, they keep us in conversation with the parts of life that we can't domesticate. Love, loss, time, and the possibility that the door between worlds is not a lock, but a hinge. And now, if you spend enough time with ghost narratives, and you'll notice that they do typically fall into two very different climates. One is tender, quiet, domestic, kind of ordinary in how it arrives. The other has teeth, prickling skin, rhythms that knock back, a feeling that the air is wearing someone else's mood. Both climates are part of the same weather of being human, and both ask for the same core skill of the Gnomian principle, intuitive self-trust. The tender climate usually enters through love. A presence sits on the edge of the bed at an hour a life ends, like we had said, across town or the world. A familiar scent pours into a room that has no reason to smell like that. Pipe tobacco on a Tuesday, lilacs in mid-July. A picture frame that just doesn't stay still on a night that you need some courage. There are visitation dreams that are not like other dreams at all, coherent, touchable, finishing conversations that grief left mid-sentence. People wake from those with a word that, it doesn't show up on lab forms, and that is peace. The experience doesn't throb like a mystery being solved. It lands like a hand that says, I'm here. Keep going. If you've had one, then you know its texture. No drama, no demand, an afterglow that feels like a soft yes somewhere behind the ribs. And that yes, that's data. You can trust it. The other climate, as we know, is much different. It's the hallway that feels watched when you are the only one awake. The room that takes warmth out of your hands as soon as you cross its threshold. A pattern that acts like a mind. Knocks 3 times or something at the same time every night. A door that opens just the width of a hand and then closes. Or slammed cupboards. Sometimes it escalates into something more. Objects that drift from where you're certain you had left them, and poltergeist like activity that often carries the flavor of mimicry or mischief, a little cruelty that enjoys your startle. And then there's the pressure you can't name, the sense that the space is hungry for attention, a reaction, for a piece of your day that you did not plan to spend on it. There are dozens of theories to hang these different climates on: bereavement, mercy, residual, replay, earthbound, sorrow, household thought forms that grow teeth when a family's conflict has nowhere else to grow. You can try them on as story tools if they help, but the most reliable compass in both climates is not a doctrine, it is you. Your body knows the difference between a visit that nourishes and a presence that extracts. One expands your breath, the other steals it. One leaves you softer, the other leaves you smaller. One makes you want to call someone you love, the other wants you alone. Learn the feel of those signatures and let them matter. When the gentle climate appears, you don't need to interrogate it into silence. You can receive, speak their name aloud if it feels right. Place the photograph up where it goes again and say the thing you didn't get to say. Light what they used to light. A candle, in the hallway, a lamp in the window, a porch bulb that they always forgot to turn off. There's a reason so many traditions use the language of hospitality with the dead. Visits, not invasions. Guests, not conquerors. When your intuition says that the guest has finished the cup of tea, you close the evening with a small kindness like thank you, and then you sleep. When the climate turns with teeth, you are allowed to be the homeowner of your own attention. You don't need anyone else's permission to say, not tonight. You can set terms without anger. This is a place for rest. This is a room for laughter. This is my child's hour to sleep. Speak that boundary in the same tone you'd use with a living person who keeps talking over you. Calm, definite, unimpressed. If the pattern is demanding, starve it out of the fuel it prefers. Refuse the script of the dread, then fixation. Put your hands back on the ordinary. Water on the stove, making tea, a song that always returns to yourself, the feel of a floor you've swept 100 times. The ordinary is not avoidance, it's how a house remembers who it is. Pay attention to place memory. The rooms carry echoes of arguments that never got a decent ending. Some stairwells remember hurried feet. If your intuition keeps offering the same sentence, this house is holding something, you can answer with acknowledgement rather than theater. This home has seen some hard things. In this season, we are choosing gentleness. Then live that line into the walls. Small meals shared, names spoken without venom, music that knows how to bless. Over weeks, that becomes the language of the room. Gotta overwrite the bad stuff with some good stuff. Um, if it doesn't work and everything gets worse, don't blame me. I'm not an expert ghost hunter. And if you're someone that dreams vividly, let dreams help you sort the climates. Visitation dreams have a grammar of their own. Simple, focused, lucid, and more fear-based dreams feel busier, more frantic, more sticky on the waking. Write a few lines in the morning and your own notebook will start to show which is which. If you feel pulled to offer something at a threshold, a bit of bread on the back step, a whispered apology to the land or to the people who came before. Follow that nudge. Intuition often speaks in gestures, and hopefully that's enough. And remember this: not everything that knocks deserves an answer. Silence is also a choice. So is leaving a light on in the hall and going to bed anyway. So is deciding that your energy belongs to the living that day. You are allowed to curate who and what gets to sit close to your own inner fire, and that curation is not fear, it is craft. The double nature of ghosts tells the double truth about us. We crave continuity. We crave safety. We want to stay connected to the love that shaped us, and we want to stay sovereign inside of our own rooms. Trusting your intuitive read lets you honor both without apology. The tender face can keep teaching you how to love. It crosses thresholds. The harsher face can keep you teaching you how to hold a threshold with dignity. However you meet the night, keep one quiet practice. End it on purpose. Close the book. Blow out the candle. Say, this is done now. It's amazing how many rooms can settle when the person who lives there, they're the one in control, signaling how the day goes. So, if ghosts are real, even as a small percentage of honest nights, then death is not a wall. It is a change of address. Something recognizably you keeps answering to your name. But what is the you that crosses? Not the resume, not the habits of the nervous system that doesn't need coffee anymore. What continues seems to be more subtle, more durable. Tone and vow and love. In the gentlest visitations, that's what we recognize first. The tone of a person distilled. Their way of entering a room becomes a way of entering a dream. Their patience arrives without a body and is still patience. Their humor has shed its mouth and still lands like a smile. That is one spiritual reading. And then there's survival, personhood paired to essence. Another reading is that existence carries residue, that the world keeps a fidelity the living often fail to give each other. Places remember our repetitions, houses replay our emphasis. A staircase keeps the rhythm of a hurried father long after the father is gone. If that's true, ghosts also ask a moral question. What patterns do you want the world to keep on your behalf? If some part of your day will echo, you are writing tomorrow's weather with the way that you set your own table tonight. And then a third reading would be sees the threshold state. In many traditions, that has names: bardo, purgatory, the in-between, a place where, no, it's like, are the dead really trapped? Are they traveling just a very long road waiting for someone to scoot them along? The living are not helpless, they are companions. The currency here is simple and ancient. Permission, gratitude, blessing, thank you, I forgive you, please forgive me, I love you, you can go now. The words are small boats that carry a heavy cargo. People who have said them at a bedside know how quickly a room can change its whole climate, how fear loosens, how faces soften into something that looks like home even before anyone moves. And then the wilder proposals that it's time folds, the world's neighbor, that there's different worlds that neighbor us more closely than we would like to admit, that once in a while, two rooms that share a door jamb and we glimpse the other tenants. If you can't grant that possibility, even as poetry, it humbles the daily certainty that all that exists is whatever, fits into your time. It suggests that we live in a neighborhood, not a bunker. A neighborhood that people can just walk into your damn door whenever they want. And whatever frame that you look at, ghosts, like we've said, have pulled on the same thread. Continuity. Continuity comforts because it means love does not surrender its reach at the edge of breath. It also confronts because it means unfinished things continue too. The promise you never finished making, the apology you rehearsed but never offered, the rhythm of a house where fear always spoke first. Continuation without transformation becomes repetition. And so the message isn't be afraid, it's be responsible. Close what you can now. Finish your sentences while you're still alive. Make the pattern that outlives you a blessing someone else can live inside without shrinking. Ancestor traditions say this more plainly. You will become an ancestor, whether you plan to or not. The choice is whether you become one on purpose. To live as a future ancestor is to, practice good haunting in advance, to leave rooms warmed, quarrels shortened, debts light, names spoken with care. It is to treat your ordinary day as an ethical will your neighborhood will inherit. If a child decades from now feels at rest on a porch you once swept, let it be because you taught the boards how to hold the gentleness, not the squeaky haunted anger. And what of the dead who come back with peace in their hands? They speak the deepest doctrine without using words, that love is a vector, stronger than endings. Love does what rivers do. It finds a way around stone. If you've known a visit like that, you already know what theology struggles to say. If you haven't, you're not excluded. Continuity is also this morning's small faithfulness, the way you carry your grief without making it someone else's cage, the way you say the names at dinner even when your throat tightens. It's the way you keep a lamp in the window because someone once did that for you and it changed your idea of night. Yes, some continuations might not be peaceful. Some presences arrive with appetite or confusion. Even then, the lesson is not to panic, but to choose. Choose which invitations you answer. Choose the tone of your house. Choose to meet the unseen with boundaries that are made of kindness, not fear. When the veil thins, trust your intuitive self. Trust to tell you what is mercy and what is hunger, and let your answer match your read. In the end, what do ghosts say about life after death? They turn the punctuation where a wall would put a period, a veil draws a comma, the sentence breathes and goes on. Your part is to decide what the clause before the comma will contain. Let it hold repair. Let it hold laughter that lingers. Let it hold the sound of your voice blessing the people you love so often that the house learns the script and can repeat it for them when you are no longer with them. Live, then, as if something of you will visit the places and people you care for. Let that something be the best of you. The tone, the vow, the love distilled. If ghosts are real, walk toward that reality with reverence. If ghosts are the world's memory working at full power, give it the kind of memory you wouldn't mind meeting at a doorway on a quiet night. Either way, death does not seem to be a wall, it is a hinge, and the door swings on the life you are crafting right now. So, my Gnomians, here we are. Lanterns still burning after a long walk with the dead. Oh, hell yeah, dude. Ghosts have always been part of the human record. Some stories arrive as warnings. Don't stray, don't mock, don't forget respect. Others come as blessings, gentle presences that finish a sentence, love left half spoken. Whether you read them as spirits, as memory of place, as energy that refuses to dissipate, or as the imagination carrying grief into a shape we can bear, ghosts reveal something undeniable. How fiercely we ache to stay connected. They remind us that death has never been able to silence love. They remind us that memory is a kind of second body, one that outlasts the first. They remind us that places hold the imprint of human lives and choices, and that we ourselves are leaving traces others are going to walk through. And so, as we close out, let's end with this blessing. May you remember that if ghosts walk among us, they walk as reminders that love and memory do not die as easily as us. May haunted places teach you reverence, not fear. May the spirits of your ancestors stand as companions, not strangers. And may your lantern of maybe remind you that even in death, the story is not yet finished. Gnome blessings, my friends. Until next time.